Today we're talking about everything you need to know about paper money. The reason paper money spread across the world so fast is because of one thing: trust. You've probably used it your whole life, but do you really know how paper money came to rule the world? Paper money was never about riches or power. It began with traders, men and women who simply needed a way to move value without carrying gold on their backs. That's why I made this video, so you can really understand the truth and the origin of paper money. In today's video, we'll go back to where it all began, how paper money first started, the confusion and chaos it created, and how it eventually spread around the world. But how did we get here? For most of human history, trade relied on barter, the clumsy, difficult act of swapping a sheep for grain, or a spear for a coat. Barter only works if you happen to find someone who has exactly what you want and wants exactly what you have.
But honestly, if I'd lived back then, things would have been way easier. I'd just trade my salt for a goat. It wasn't just food either. I could bring you a basket and trade it for your chicken, as long as we both agreed.
But there was one little problem. What if I had salt and needed a goat, but the goatherd only wanted wheat? Suddenly, my salt was useless, and I won't be able to change it. And also, if you received spoiled food or a fake tool, you were cheated. Since there was no official money or formal law, arguments over quality often led to shouting matches, feuds, or physical fights. Money was eventually invented to provide a clear value and stop these constant disputes. As people got tired of that confusion, civilization grew restless, and that's when humans began to search for a better idea that would let people buy what they wanted while still keeping what they already owned. A symbol of value. It began with people trading base metals for goods, then gradually moved to precious metals like gold, silver. The precious metals were more valuable in small portable amounts, which made them perfect for bigger transactions. From the furnaces of the ancient Lydian Empire in what is now modern-day Turkey came the world's first official coins around the 7th century BCE. Each coin was stamped with the roaring lion, the emblem of Lydian kings, to prove its weight and purity. But there was still one big problem with coins. They were just too heavy. If I wanted to buy something worth a bag of coins, I'd have to carry them all the way there, heavy, noisy, and risky. Armies, traders, and travelers all shared the same headache. Too much metal, not enough movement. Think about it this way. Buying a yacht worth $300,000, and each coin weighs 0.4 grams at just $1. You'd need a truck to carry your money, and maybe a few guards too. And that's when the world began to imagine something else. It wasn't born as paper money. It started as an idea built on trust. The first paper money didn't come from European bankers. It was born in China during the Tang Dynasty, around the 7th century. The Tang Dynasty era was China's golden age of culture and art. By then, they had already mastered paper, ink, and printing. But carrying copper coins across vast provinces was a nightmare, especially for merchants traveling the Silk Road. They were constantly threatened by robbers, and the coins were still too heavy to move in large quantities, especially when traveling to trade. So an ingenious merchant in Sichuan named Cheng began issuing paper notes called jiaozes, representing deposits of coins kept safely elsewhere. The jiaoz's currency was basically an early form of a check. Merchants could trade their heavy coins for these paper notes, sometimes called bills of exchange or promissory notes, to make travel and trade safer. After depositing their coins with trusted institutions, they received paper receipts instead. These lightweight notes were even nicknamed flying money because they were so easy to lose along the journey.
Flying money? I bet many people lost theirs because it was such a strange new system back then.
When traders reached their destination, they could redeem the notes for coins at another trusted branch or partner. This system made long-distance trade far easier and more secure. At first, these notes were private promises, just receipts based on trust between merchants. But the idea spread fast. By the 11th century, the Song Dynasty government stepped in. They began printing official notes called jiao chao, stamped with the imperial seal and backed by the emperor's word. These could be exchanged for real coins. But over time, as wars drained the treasury and metal became scarce, the government printed more and more notes. Paper money slowly replaced coins as the main currency. But soon, with so many notes in circulation, their value dropped and counterfeits spread everywhere. I know you're probably wondering right now, how were they able to fund those wars with paper money that was only valid inside China? Well, along the Silk Road and in busy markets, even foreign merchants from Central Asia and the Middle East accepted Chinese paper money, because they could still use it within China or trade it for goods before leaving. Eventually, though, after the government flooded the system with too much paper, trust collapsed, the notes lost their value, and paper money nearly disappeared from daily Chinese life. The later Chinese dynasties, especially the Ming, faced the same problem: too much printing and too little value. Inflation soared, trust collapsed, and by the early 1400s, the Ming government completely abandoned paper money. The world's first experiment with printed currency had officially failed. But you can't stop civilization. The seed was already planted, and people had gotten a taste of an easier life with paper notes. And this was just the beginning of paper money. because before its fall in China, there was a man from the West who witnessed its rise, experienced its use, and left before it all came to an end. Marco Polo came to China for trade and exploration. His family were wealthy Venetian merchants, and in the late 1200s, Europe was eager to trade with the East for silk, spices, and precious goods. At just 17, Marco joined his father and uncle on the Silk Road, aiming to reach the court of Kublai Khan, the Mongol emperor who welcomed foreign visitors. He spent nearly 17 years in China, serving the emperor and traveling across Asia, amazed by its wealth, inventions, and especially paper money, something no European had ever seen before. When Marco Polo returned to Europe and spoke about China's paper money, most people didn't believe him. The idea that simple paper could hold the same value as gold or silver sounded absurd. Europe was still tied to its heavy metal coins, so many dismissed his stories as fantasy or exaggeration. Years later, after returning to Venice in 1295, Marco was captured during a naval battle between Venice and Genoa in 1298 and imprisoned in Genoa. While locked up in a Genoese prison, Marco shared his adventures with a writer named Rustichello da Pisa. Rustichello wrote down everything Marco described, from China's wealth to its strange, powerful paper money. Those tales became the famous book The Travels of Marco Polo, completed around the year 1298. At first, readers doubted his words, but over time, his stories spread across Europe and sparked curiosity. Centuries later, when trade and banking evolved, Europe finally embraced the same idea he once described, turning disbelief into imitation. After Polo was released, he returned to Venice, where he remained for the rest of his life. He died in the year 1324. Marco Polo's story wasn't enough to convince Europe, but wait till you hear how part of Europe managed their precious metals centuries later. So in the 1600s, people in Europe also began to see metal, even precious metal, as too heavy to carry, the same problem China had faced centuries earlier. Then they turned to the goldsmith, who had more secure vaults to store their precious metals safely. People trusted them, and in exchange for their deposit, the goldsmiths issued receipts as proof of the gold being held. Merchants and traders soon realized it was much easier and safer to exchange these paper receipts among themselves than to constantly trade heavy metal coins. Everyone knew the receipts could be redeemed for real gold on demand, so the receipts themselves began to circulate as a form of payment. Without realizing it, people had started using paper money again, paper that represented the value of precious metals stored elsewhere. This practice remained private between merchants and traders, just like it was first done in China, because they were the ones constantly exchanging money for goods and goods for money. And this was just the beginning of Europe using paper notes to represent value. This system evolved into official banknotes issued by chartered institutions, the most famous example being the Bank of England, founded in 1694. At first, these early banknotes weren't real money. They were more like receipts or promises for the precious metals that had been deposited. If you held one, it meant the goldsmith owed you a certain amount of gold or silver, and you could return at any time to exchange the paper for the actual metal. Over time, people stopped redeeming notes for gold as their trust in the crown grew. Habit turned paper into value. The worth of money shifted from gold to government trust, marking the birth of fiat currency. But if creating banknotes was their big idea, wait till you hear how they almost printed themselves into disaster. The concept of banknotes, pioneered by the Bank of England, was quickly adopted by other major European countries like France, Sweden, and the Netherlands all began issuing their own paper notes. This indicates that the convenience and efficiency of paper money, compared to the coin, was immediately recognized across the continent. The concept also jumped across the Atlantic, where the American colonies printed their own paper currency of some called bill of credits. The primary motivation for colonial printing was practical and urgent to fund wars like the French and Indian War or the Revolutionary War.
War? If only they could have called China for some advice, but yeah, no phones back then.
And to keep trade flowing without relying on a constant supply of hard currency. The early experience with paper money in those various regions quickly revealed a fundamental economic risk. Many of these attempts failed because the itching authorities in Europe and the American colonies printed too many notes without restraint. With so much paper money being printed, its value began to plummet. This led to severe inflation, a massive loss in purchasing power, and people slowly lost trust in paper currency. By the late 1700s, many of these early currencies, like the American Continental, had completely crashed, leaving people with nothing but worthless paper. The failure proved that the paper itself was worthless. A banknote had no real value like gold or silver. It was just paper and ink. But if paper changed trade, wait till you hear how gold changed everything again. To solve the issues caused by the unrestrained printing of paper money, nations adopted a formal system to restore confidence in their currency. Every note or unit of currency was at least in theory convertible or redeemable for a set weight of gold upon demand at the central bank. A dollar might be fixed at 1/20th of an ounce of gold. So, if you had $20, you could exchange it for 1 ounce of gold. This system is called the gold standard, where the value of money was based on a fixed quantity of gold held by the government or the bank. The gold standard forced governments to maintain discipline. They could only print as much currency as they had gold reserves to back it. This mechanism naturally kept inflation low, because the money supply couldn't expand faster than the nation's gold holdings. For over a century, this system provided a stable foundation for global trade. Though durable for decades, it couldn't withstand the pressures of modern warfare and economic crises. During the World Wars, from 1914 to 1945, countries desperately needed massive amounts of money to pay for weapons, soldiers, food, and supplies. But under the gold standard, every piece of paper money had to be backed by real gold in the nation's treasury. Wars, however, are brutally expensive. Governments were spending far more than the gold they actually had.
If you were the government, what would you do next? Print more paper money, right? Exactly. That's precisely what the governments did.
So, to keep funding the wars, they stopped converting paper into precious metals and began printing more paper money instead. This broke the link between money and gold. The system simply couldn't handle such massive financial pressure. Gold was gone, and what replaced it was even more unpredictable. Long before the World Wars, on July 6, 1785, the Continental Congress officially adopted the dollar as the unit of currency for the United States. Its name is an anglicized version of the German word Thaler, a term originally shortened from Joachimsthaler, a silver coin minted in 16th century Bohemia. Then, in 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the US dollar's link to gold, an event known as the Nixon shock. This move collapsed the Bretton Woods system and ended centuries of money being tied to gold or silver. Before then, the dollar had been backed by gold at $35 per ounce, and foreign nations could exchange their dollars for US gold. But when Nixon closed the gold window, it meant dollars could no longer be converted into gold. From that point on, money became fiat currency valuable not because of gold, but because people trusted the government's word. It gave governments and central banks greater control over how much money they could issue, but also brought the constant risk of inflation. It was a leap of faith, and it's still the system the world uses today. Hold on, that's not all I've got to tell you about China. After the Ming Dynasty, the Qing Dynasty ruled China from 1644 to 1912. They occasionally issued paper money, but most people still use silver taels and copper coins, and some used both paper notes and metal money, depending on what was available. By the late Qing era, modern banks like the Imperial Bank of China began issuing new paper notes, though political chaos created many competing currencies. Then, in 1949, after the Chinese Civil War, the People's Republic of China established a unified national currency, the renminbi, or yuan, issued by the People's Bank of China. Today, paper money itself is fading. Credit cards, digital wallets, cryptocurrencies, they're all echoes of that first leap from metal to symbol. Each step moves us further from the tangible and deeper into the abstract. But the principle hasn't changed. Money is trust-written, printed, or coded. From mulberry bark in ancient China to blockchain algorithms in Silicon Valley, humanity's currency has always been a story, a shared belief that a simple token can hold the weight of the world. Paper money was never about paper. It was about people, about our need to trust, to trade, to dream beyond what we can touch.